Our next featured conversation is an insightful dialogue exploring the current state of Native Americans in entertainment as measured by inclusion in the writer's room, representation on set, and how the is current growing forward. The panel, represented by a diverse group of tribes, will provide their perspectives in navigating the industry by sharing their experiences working with networks, studios, and showrunners. Led by Director of Strategy, Native American Media Alliance, and CEO Barcid Foundation, Ian Skorodin. Panelists will further unveil the lack of awareness regarding diversity within indigenous communities and the Native American diaspora. Everyone, please help me welcome Ian Skorodin for a necessary conversation on understanding the Native American voice in entertainment.
Yay, Skorodin.
Thank you, Dana. I appreciate the introduction. I'm Ian Skorodin, Director of Strategy for the Native American Media Alliance and CEO of the Barcid Foundation. The Native American Media Alliance offers numerous programs that develop Native American writers, actors, and artists. So I want to welcome everyone to the Diversity Exclusion panel. This discussion is meant to provide genuine feedback from Native American writers, filmmakers, and actors regarding the current state of our representation in media. I want to take this time to thank Michelle Ray, the Executive Director of the Walter Cates Foundation, for continuing to push this conversation. I also want to take this time to thank some of the partners of the Hollywood Creative Forum that have shown true and genuine partnership to bolster the Native American community in this space. Comcast, NBC Universal, A&E, Charter, and Warner Media have been incredible supporters. We hope this panel will inspire support from other entities that have found partnerships with other diverse communities, but have not yet committed to ours thus far. I adamantly want to thank our panelists for being here. They are incredibly talented, represent many tribes, and have a wealth of knowledge as it pertains to the industry. So without further ado, let's get started. So I really want to jump in with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. There's been a very focused and targeted, aim, but not so much for the Native American community, and our community has been left out of a lot of the conversations. So how can we, or you as artist, writer, actor, filmmaker, keep our community in the forefront so we are noticed and continue the growth we are currently seeking? So Sienna, if you don't mind, I'd like to start off with you.
Hi, I'm Sienna. I think when we talk about this, it's about keeping ourselves present in the conversation by just keeping ourselves present and bringing in other voices that we know and trust and showing the diverse and modern reach of Native voices, because a lot of our narrative, I think, collectively in the world is that we're a people from the past. And I think it's really important that we press right now, especially when things are like getting hot, that we are a people of the present. And that's not just, it's partially through being purposeful in what we do and what we choose to say and who we bring into the conversations and stuff, but it's partially just by existing. I really, truly think that's on a level that does so much just by existing in the film and television world. I had a boss at one point, and we were talking about okay, so we're thinking about a character, a not white character. Who should we have? I was like, Native American. And I was like, Native Americans can be all kinds of things. Look at me. And he was like, because he had a perspective of Native Americans in his head. And then he kind of connected that I was Native American and this was his perspective. And then it was wrong and all these different things. And now, when I talk to him about his projects, there are Native characters just in it. I'm not even there anymore, but it's all about just I think not only bringing in other Native voices and telling our stories, but also just being physically present and saying, hello, yes. I don't know if that was a helpful answer.
It was. And, I really like your use of really these technical terms like getting hot. That really does help. It really does place us where we're at. What do you mean by that, actually? Maybe you could enlighten our audience, please.
Well, we've had 2 TV shows starring Native characters with Native writers. There's more children's TV shows coming out. I know every other TV show is starting to shape what does their Native character look like and what would that be like for their story. There's Native movies coming out, and it's just right now more than ever. I spent my entire childhood being upset that the Native American looking character in Scooby-Doo, the one where they see the aliens, was actually an alien. I remember as a kid, I never really registered why I turned off the movie before they revealed that Native American coded character was an alien. I'd always turn it off right before then. And then as an adult, I realized. And now all of a sudden it's everywhere. And there's all sorts of different types of Natives I'm seeing. And they're not, mask off an alien at the end that Shaggy had a crush on. And so when I say getting hot, I just mean like in my whole life, have never seen so many, not only different Native stories, but just Native Americans and Native stories. It's exciting. There's been Rutherford Falls. There's been Reservation Dogs. Spirit Rangers is going to come out. There's a bunch of things. There's so much, and it's a really exciting time. And so that's why I'm getting hot, because like I feel like, oh, it's getting hot.
Thank you for that. Dawn, can you share maybe some ideas you think how we might be able to continue to keep our presence up front and in everyone's mind?
I wish I had a good answer for this. How do you keep present? I think, and how do you bring that to like the narrative space when we're excluded, and the whole like monolith, like I guess what I'll say is that I think you just have to. It's kind of what Sienna was speaking to a little bit. I think in terms of like being present. And, as a writer, you spend so much time like in your own space, in your own mind, and your own craft and practice. And one thing that I think that I hold as like, how can I make this practice of writing, how can I sovereignize that? How can I bring this in like an indigenous voice? And so when I'm with, pen and paper, or on my laptop, I'm able to like sovereignize that space as a Native creative person, a TwoSpirit person. And so beyond that, what happens? You have to be out in the world. And so I think that I was working with Joey Soloway on a show, and they have Topple Productions, and I had learned that they had just, it was announced anyway, that they were writing a feature film called Mother Trucker, and I knew it was going to be set in Alaska, and I was like, yo, let's talk about this movie, and they were like, what? I'm like, yeah, I know that's where my people are from. So, I'm Alaska Native, and then I come to find out, like, after some time, they reached out to me, and I actually came on as a co-writer for that script, and it was really interesting. And I think that initially that story had no Native presence whatsoever. So by me just kind of putting that little seed in Joey's mind of like, oh, by the way, there are Native people in this place that you're going to be talking about, and the presence is very strong. And I didn't know at the time that it was completely absent from the story, right? It's a memoir. It's a memoir about a writer who went up to Fairbanks and did the Dalton Highway with the, at the time, the only female road ice trucker. So I'm battling COVID right now, so I'm a little bit foggy. So if I mute myself or something, it's because I'm coughing, or if I black out for a minute, it's just I'm probably getting some tea or something. But anyway, the point of this being, I guess, is that it's just you show up, right? I'm a creator. I show up and I try to tell as many people that I'm, in the sphere with, in this filmmaking world, of who I am, what I want to talk about, what I represent, and hopefully that touches on something. And it does when you're around the right people. So much love and gratitude to Joey Soloway, who saw that there was a piece of the story that was missing, and not to like throw it into like this person's life experience, with this memoir, but they understood that there was a greater story to the narrative that they were talking about, and they invited me in, and we crafted something I think that works.
You brought up some really great phrases, like you said, sovereignizing the space. I think that's really important, and it's a great concept. Sovereignty is so important to us in terms of, our nations are meant to be sovereign nations, even though we have this trust authority with the government. That's a big part of who we are, our land, and keeping it our land. So that's a really cool phrase that I'm going to have to steal. So, Kara, what's some suggestions that you might have? And actually, you know what? You actually mentioned you were a part of our youth program last week, and you mentioned how how you as an artist were able to make a change. I don't want to step on the story at all, so I'll let you take it from there.
Oh, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Kara Myers. I'm an actress, and I'm currently, well, not currently, but currently, I'm on Killers of the Flower Moon, which is being directed by Martin Scorsese. And what Ian's talking about is one of the issues I had with the script was the fact that my character, her alcoholism just kind of seems to stem out of nothing. And so before even like filming or anything, I asked for a meeting with Marty, and he was so sweet and kind, and he gave it to me. And I was like, I don't want this alcoholism to be nothing, because it's something that is very prevalent in our community, and I don't want it to just be another, oh, that's trauma, so I wanted it to be really actually rooted in the character. And when someone close dies to my character, I kind of wanted that to the alcoholism to stem from that, because before, alcohol was just fun, but now it's a problem. But yeah, so it's nice because even someone as big as Mr. Scorsese, he was willing to listen to me and collaborate with me, and actually listen to the fact that hey, alcoholism is such a problem in our community. My dad was an alcoholic. He was an abusive alcoholic. So it's I know that it is a very big problem. And so it's amazing that if you are willing to, step up and be like, hey, can we talk about this? Let's communicate. Then people are willing to listen, which is amazing. They're not just nope, this is how we do it, So I think that's what Ian was saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sorry. That's really cool. I heard it that you just pulled him aside and said, "I need to speak to you, and this is what we're going to do." That's the version I heard.
Oh, I actually asked for a meeting. It was before we started filming, because character-wise, we're a little vague on our characters, because and so me and the sisters were like, "Hey, can we talk to you?" And he was very, very open of these are your characters, you develop them, and I'll go do my thing. And we're like, okay, we got that.
That's great. No, that's good. That's I think the youth actually asked about another actor in another film, and they were questioning why this character was treated so poorly. They were an indigenous character in a non-indigenous themed film. And it struck me that this person just didn't bother to ask, to say, hey, why is my character here? What are they doing? What is my dimension? So that's great to hear that you did that, that you asked, and and then they were receptive to it as well.
Yeah, some people aren't, but luckily I was in a good position where they were. And to Sienna's point, their natives are so hot right now. They're on the actor's side of it, I'm auditioning for so many native films and native characters and stuff that are, I mean, it's amazing, because I'd say 90% of them are rooted in the native community. But then there's also people where we're just cops, and we're just lawyers, and we're just you don't have to make every single thing we do super indigenous. You can just include us, because we're just people,
Yes. And I like to make sure that we do have accurate representation. Jason here representing the male perspective. Thank you for that. What can you share? So what can you share just in terms of, as an actor and as a writer, maintaining relevance for our community?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, just even going back to everyone's points, it's good that we're in our hotness. It's not just period piece stuff. And we are just people. I've been just a cop on a show. I've been just a fireman, which is great, because we are. but it's also it's good for us to see for our own people to see it that way too, just because of the trauma of only seeing us in the past, and we know of all the ways that Native youth experienced the depression and all of that. I'm writing a play right now for a theater company where he's a PhD student who's in particle physics. We need to see that side of us because too often high STEM field that's not a position that in popular culture an indigenous person would be considered for. I mean, other than I can't remember his name now, working for NASA, last name Yazi. But anyway, it's good for us to be in those positions. I remember a few years ago now, I was speaking to another indigenous actor. It was right when 12 Years a Slave came out, and he was like, when do we get our film like that? I'm like, well, yeah, like that would be great to have a Trail of Tears film, but that shouldn't be the end of it. I mean, that would be educational for most of the country that still doesn't know that happened. But we need the present day stuff, which is why I think everyone's eating up the greatness that is the reservation dogs and what Sierra's done with Rutherford Falls, and it's so important and relevant for so many reasons. Not just to take advantage of them. They're hot. There's a reason we just are, and yeah, I think I answered the question there.
You did. I understand fully. You're an attractive man. I think that's what I am gathering.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
No, I appreciate it. No, that was good. So now we talked about what we can do. I want to talk about what studios and networks can do. Like what recommendations, what would we ask? What would we, prescribe to them that they could try to do? What can they do? So what recommendations do we have? Kara, what recommendations would you have for a studio or network to continue to bolster their understanding of our community?
Well, I would say if you're going to have a Native American character, I don't know, get Native American writers. I mean, that sounds crazy. Maybe Native American actors. But I mean, especially if you're wanting to do a certain tribe, because, there's 547 registered tribes and we're all kind of, well, we are different, no, kind of, but we are all different. So it's if you want to, I know, I mean, I don't have COVID brain, but I feel like I do. But basically it's if you, if you're going to do something on Wichita, hire Wichita actors, hire Wichita writers, or people who have, actually know their stuff. I mean, I don't know. Seems like a simple solution to me. That's kind of it.
You bring up a good point, actually. In the Asian American community, the Asian community, they are starting to actually push to make sure that if they are going to focus on a certain country, that they use a certain person from that country. Which I mean, it makes a little more sense maybe on their end. You just mentioned if you're gonna hire Wichita actors. Do you think we're there yet where we can tell studios to hire very specifically from those tribes?
Not necessarily, no. Because even on the movie, I was like, no, we're not. I think too, part of it is just I think the lack of representation in the media has shown our youth that this isn't a proper route for them to go, I guess. Acting and stuff and entertainment isn't gonna pay off for them. So I'm hoping that now we can get more youth and more people will see, natives in there, because even on Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm playing Osage. And as much as I wish that they could have casted an actual Osage people, we have a ton of Osage behind the camera, in front of consultants, everywhere you turn, there's someone Osage to help you, which is amazing. And the fact that, the production's is really trying to make it as authentic as possible. But then it does become the problem of, not necessarily that there's native actors, but the native actors of the specific tribe you want, so that's definitely a thing. But I think that, yeah, I mean, if you I found, with this production, like the Osage people are so excited to have a story told about them. So they're so open to telling us stories and sharing their traditions with us, sharing their cultures. I mean, they open their homes to us. So like, I mean, it's like, if you ask people, like, especially natives, like we love telling stories. That's like our whole thing, storytelling, you know? So it's like, I feel like people will help and do whatever they can to make it as accurate as possible. I mean, I feel like the actor side might be a little bit more harder when it comes to tribe specific, but if you can find writers might even be hard on some tribes, but I doubt it. Just look, we're there. Come on.
You make a good point. I mean, just like that, they do have to look. They have to do their due diligence. It is tough. Our population, isn't big enough to sustain, to provide, an entire production of a certain tribe. But what you said about having Osage involved, and I think the way that it was handled, by being like full transparency and full communication with the tribe, I think that's where you'll find success, right? It seems like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Doan, what do you think? What can we prescribe or suggest or recommend to our student network counterparts to continue to bolster our community?
Well, it's it's having the meetings with us, right? And like I think just number one is like we're human beings and we're creative people, and I think when we layer upon like especially with Hollywood representation and lack of representation of Native people, and how our voice has been really constricted, over the past 100 or so years, right? And the visibility too, like just the representation on the screen of Native people. There's a lot to kind of unpack and to reframe and to correct. But I think number one is just like, listen to us, meet us where we are, listen to what we have to say, read our stories. Don't try to there's one thing right now where I'm really, as a storyteller, I want to be able to tell a story the way that I see it working, right? And I think that sometimes there's a lot of like more circular narratives, non-linear narratives within Native storytelling. That's not the Hollywood way, right? And that's not. So I think it's just something to like, not just like meeting us where we are, but letting us tell the story how we want to tell it. That's what I would say. And I think that there's just a lot to get over. There's, gatekeepers. And so I think there's a lot of creative people in the business that are completely supportive of us, that want to see us succeed. They want to give us the seat at the table. They love our stories. They like us as people, right? But there's just, I think, a lot of gatekeeping still that goes beyond just being a indigenous storyteller. There's a lot of things that are restricted by those gatekeepers. And so I think that in the end, it's like I want to see more Native people rising and having positions that are able to, make those studio decisions, right? That we're not just the writer, but there's, I want like a studio exec who's like a Native person. I want people just to flood into the industry in all its forms, and just I think that's what we're going to need to see. But I think until then, it's like meet us where we are. We have a knack for storytelling. I think also it's like to be kind of pigeonholed in as like a Inupiat person or like a Native person, right? It's like, oh, well, you could maybe write for this story, but it's like I have a lot of life experience, right? I'm a human being like everybody else. And so if you're looking at a white writer who can write for another group of people, or to lay in on some narrative storytelling, like I can do that too. I'm not saying that we need to be writing for, yeah, I say that, but I'm like, I don't want it to seem like we're, I I don't want to go in. I think the appropriate person should be brought in, but at the same time, it's, you know, we're curious people when we're storytellers. We're active in the world, right? We observe and we're curious, and so if you're a good storyteller, then I think you should be given the opportunity and not be beholden just because you're a native storyteller, that somehow like you can only you know, put the pen to paper for something that's about, like, I don't know, something of the past, or just a native character. But I feel like I'm rambling now.
That's great. No, I mean, it kind of goes to, you know, even what I think Jason brought up regarding acting. You know, we want to play normal people. We can write, quote unquote, you know, maybe, you know, normal stories, non-native stories. You know, you bring up a good way. You say, just listen to us. You know, I think there's a lot of, right now, people are asking us to explain things, and they just need to listen instead of us. They're not, you know, not asking us questions, but just listening to what we have to say. So that's great.
Right.
Jason? Oh, I'm sorry?
Well, it's just, I was going to say, to follow up on that, those are all that's exactly the point. And if you think about it, it's like, well, the white writer typically would just be like, yeah, I can write for anyone. Well, how come the opposite isn't always true? It's about the experience, you know, what false equivalency are you showing that, like, well, you're a native writer, I'm not sure you can handle writing for, I don't know, Shameless, something like that, because there's no way to ever relate to anything, you know, that's not of your own, but yet the white writer gets that. And, you know, have all these things that previously said. There was, I can't remember, some comedian was like, the difference between rich and wealthy, and in this case, I think it fits, like you said, getting a studio exec and someone to stand up for us. Rich person is like, this dates the reference, but like Shaquille O'Neal, who's playing basketball. The wealthy person is the person who's paying Shaq. We're getting in positions right now with, you know, we're getting more accurate representation. We're getting films produced about our people, written by our people, behind the scenes, all that. But now we need that exec who is the quote unquote wealthy person as far as the position they have. And that's when you start getting that we matter, and we're not just a flavor of the month or the year, whatever. That's where it becomes more of the well, we've been here since time immemorial. We're going to be, but within the industry, that's when that's going to change. I think.
That's a great point. I think that our community sometimes has a misunderstanding of these things in terms of the hierarchy, you know, just in finance and things like that. You know, the excellent Chris Rock quote to really highlight and stick the landing there, Jason.
So, it wasn't Chris Rock. Okay, it was Chris Rock. All right, there we go.
I think so. I'm pretty sure. You know, so we don't have a chat of people who can, you know, correct us. So hopefully that is. But that sounds right to me. Sienna, what would you tell your studio and network counterparts how to best continue to bolster their understanding of our community?
Well, I think it's not only supporting like native writers, native actors, native producers, native execs, natives in all different fields who can then speak to being native and indigenous and their relationships with different stories they're telling, and also approving different stories, because when it's different when the execs and the people in positions of power are the ones greenlighting native stories. But also, Kara did something insanely brave in that you went on a Martin Scorsese film. Scorsese, I have to say it right, I guess. And you said, I have Scorsese. I'm not even joking. I have no idea how to say it. I'm sure I've said it wrong my whole life. But you went up and you said something, and you said, okay, I'm uncomfortable with this, and how can we fix this? How can we talk about this? Because that was your job, right? And so I think a lot of times when you look at people who are working in production and working in acting and art and all sorts of different things, that's your job, right? And you're trying to not only do good representation, but also keep your job. And how how insanely hard that is. And for the white people who are non-native people who are in charge to be aware of themselves, to know how hard that is. Because I was in a diversity thing where they were talking to our room, and they were talking about different like strategies for talking about diversity and stuff. And they were like, it's not if something unsavory happens, it's when someone doesn't know what they're talking about, or when this happens. And those are the paths that need prepared. So preparing paths when you're telling stories, especially Native stories, for when the story is not necessarily correct or right. Because as non-natives are going to mess it up, and that doesn't make you evil or bad. It makes you someone who's grown up in a system of very specific stories you've been fed, not only in television, but in your history books, in your classrooms, all this deprogramming and re-understanding things that needs to happen. And it's okay to get things wrong, but you need to be open to the fact that a lot of times, and sometimes, you will be wrong, and that someone is very worried about talking to you about it because it's hard, and making that as easy as possible for us to come up and say like, okay, I have a beef with this, or, oh, okay, I've actually experienced this, or, oh, okay, this makes me uncomfortable and I want to fix it. And then actually allowing that person to do the solutions, because it's amazing that you did that. And it's hard, and a million applauses for that. And I'm glad it turned out right, because we don't always know when we go into that, it's going to turn out well. And the person, I feel like very often is always like, oh, but it did. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't know how I don't know how this could have gone. This could have gone south really fast, and I could have still done the same thing. And I think it's fine that non-Native people have incorrect ideas, as long as they're ready to change them. I remember I was working with an old boss on something, and they had a Native character. And at one point he was like, oh, but kind of works because like they're stoic, and they're respectful. And then he kind of looked at me, and he was like, Sienna's Native. Sienna's not stoic. Sienna's not respectful. She doesn't shut up. And the character grew and changed so much from there. But like, he said it, and he looked at me, and in my face, I was like, really? This is what you want to say? I didn't have to say anything at that point. But the fact that he wasn't like, no, actually, it's actually fine, I did that. He was just like, oh, okay. And so it's about making it easy to have these conversations, and being aware that these conversations will happen. There's no world in which you read every history book and you watch everything, and the conversation, and you never have to experience one of these conversations. It 100% will happen. And that doesn't mean you're bad. It just means that's life.
Jason, did you have something to add?
No, I would say to add on to that, and part of this conversation too about, hey, if you're not bringing us onto these projects to help tell the story accurately, when these mistakes happen, it doesn't necessarily mean whoever made the mistake is evil or was trying to make a mistake. It's like you said, it's born out of their particular, let's hope for the best here. Yeah. But they grew up under with a very specific set of experiences, and then we're trying to apply that to a Native character, where if we can partner up and be like, see, if you'd have just come to us, or if you'd have come to anyone and said, hey, someone who's like this, help me, then both sides walk away happier. And I think the final product, and we know the final product will be better, but I think part of that too is just saying, like, besides not not having the fear from our side of approaching people, but so that they don't feel, I don't, just that it's okay for them to ask the questions in the first place. If they're in the higher position, it doesn't make them, they're not admitting anything other than they have the same public school U.S. history classes that everyone else did, which ignored everything. That's what I got.
Thank you, Jason. That was great. That was great.
So, I think that it's like what you're hitting on, Jason, is like it's a continuation of American history, right? That non-Native people feel it is their right, almost their duty, to, like, if they're going to include us, they get to say how it's going to look, right? Like they get to like say when we're excluded, when we're included, how that's going to look, how that's going to be portrayed, right? Like they have that power. And so it's like to reframe that, it's like, there's a lot at play when you really think about it, that there's a lot to talk about. I feel like I was going to go somewhere with this, but I think that's just like there's so much that, yeah, and it's crazy to me that we wouldn't be seen as just like a complex person like anybody else, right? We come with our own complexities as a person. Anyway, okay.
Well, because I think what you're talking about,
crazy talk.
Go ahead, Sienna or Kara.
Oh, I was just saying, I think what's going on there is it's not only about making sure these pathways are built for, especially in situations where the power dynamic and you're collaborating isn't necessarily even having those avenues built, but also just getting native producers, getting native execs, fostering natives in all different parts of storytelling, not just on the screen and not just putting down the words, but the people who are saying stamp, yes, that's what we're going to do. And stamp, yes, that's what we're going to do. Like getting natives in all these different facets. I just think producers and execs do stamps apparently and point at things, but I know they do other things like budgets.
What's the stamp say?
It says greenlit.
I thought it was a literal green light they turned on, like when you got a script. It was so it's a stamp. Okay,
yes, so, the green light
stamp first.
But no, look, you guys brought up great points. Sienna, you mentioned what Kara did. There's always this, there's this really internal discussion that natives have amongst themselves when they're on set or what have you. And they feel like sometimes they have to police the situation. And that's very uncomfortable for us when someone's saying they're part of our community when we know that probably they are not. They're not saying the right things. They're saying, like things that just don't resonate with our community. It's like sometimes you're allowed to create your own narrative. And that's allowed because people they're telling it to wouldn't know any better. And then also, Dawn, you mentioned how they tell us that, like, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to portray you. This is what you're going to say. This is what you're going to do. I think that's another great point, that they're still not really listening. They still want us to explain and they want to do it their way. So I think that's just some really great points you guys are making. So you guys have mentioned also that, we're not a monolith. And I think, there's a lot to be said about that. So like, for instance, we are seeing a call for like general indigenous voices that can include tribes from around the world. It turns out it can be a form of like corporate box checking. Do we have our indigenous person? Yes. Okay. While positive in many ways, it minimizes the American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian opportunities as other countries subsidize film and TV. So those indigenous communities benefit from that. However, here we don't have subsidies from the government for film and television. So we're at a huge disadvantage in terms of being able to produce material, have like a network, much like they have in Canada, and just other apparatus that the government funds. So what are some ways to ensure that our tribal communities here in the U.S. Don't lose our voice in this new indigenous landscape? Jason, you look the most concerned. You were frowning the hardest. Okay.
It was more of a look of I need to come up with an answer. He's probably going to call on me.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. No, I mean, yes, that's the situation here in the U.S. And I think, given our unique voices, we just need to continue to encourage as many of our communities as possible to participate and know that they could have besides viewing, but even participating as a member of the entertainment industry, because the more that you're in it, the more you can affect that change. Reaching, youth workshops, business of acting workshops. I'm on the SAG-AFTRA Native American Committee. And we've done several of these workshops in our tribal communities. I see that smirk, Ian. I know we have an interesting relationship between the Barcid Foundation and the SAG-AFTRA Native American Committee. Sure. I just thought I'd acknowledge that. But I mean, these are ways to do it. Saying, look, this is an opportunity for you. You become active in it, then there's more of this change, and more of your own distinct voice has an opportunity to affect that change. Is my off-the-cuff answer, since you called on me first.
That's okay. So I sent them a couple of days ago. But that's great. Encouraging our communities to participate is fantastic. That's the way to go. I love that answer. Kara, haven't heard from you in a while. What would you do to ensure our make sure that our voice isn't like muffled or saturated by the involvement of other Indigenous communities?
Well, I think it just speaks to like what Dawn was saying earlier is like we each have our own stories. So it's like don't, think that like, okay, well, just because my experience is being told that like anyone can play it kind of thing. It's like I feel like when you're talking about like Native Americans, it's a specific kind of like relationship we have with like the US and with each other and stuff like that we understand. And so I would hope that they would try to cast and get writers, get producers, get consultants, get actors, get like anyone and everyone they can from the community that they're trying to tell the story from, and actually listen to them and work with them versus because I mean the more diverse faces I see online, on screen, I'm ecstatic about. So, I mean, I love the indigenous, like worldwide indigenous movement, but also like, if you're telling a story specific to Native Americans, like let's keep it Native American, maybe,
Yeah, I think there's. I think like as these like countries that have a large indigenous presence. They acknowledge this worldwide indigenous collaboration, but they do focus on their communities. Like government subsidies do remain with those populations in those countries. So we as American Indians wouldn't be able to take advantage of those. The reverse isn't true. Other communities can come here and take advantage of the opportunities that are here. So it just puts us at a bit of a disadvantage because we don't have the opportunity.
I'm through, Biden. Come on.
Well, he just handed out $5 trillion this morning. I think we're all caught up now, right? So
well, just give us a little bit. Just give us a little bit so we can.
Oh, we're done.
Things,
We're done. Okay.
Exactly. Well, we'll see what it does to the inflation. Okay, let's see what that happens. Anyway, sorry, Sienna. I would like to know how you feel about this.
It's such an emotionally complicated thing because there's a lot going on there, right? Like the fact that Indigenous voices have been emboldened around the world, right, does a couple of super positive things. Not only allows like people who are settlers look at other communities and be like, oh, I see what happened to Indigenous populations, and then do like the vaguest amount of math and be like, wait a second, and then think about our Indigenous populations and Native Americans and help them like understand and digest like how they should be acting towards that. And not only have we been like extra supported by Indigenous voices, I mean, Reservation Dogs has Stoyan Harjo, but it also has Taika Waititi. He's the one saying, oh, we got to tell this Native American story because he understands as an Indigenous person who has seen that in their own community and seen it around the world and they've seen it in their friends and connected that this is a story to tell. It's a Native American story to tell. And so when I look at that, I am so excited. But then when I look at some of the settler or white voices or non-Native voices that then look at us and then think that they can swap us out to get what they want. And that is frustrating because it's almost like a personal absolution and a purposeful ignoring of the fact that Native Americans are the indigenous people of the Americas. And so while I see indigenous people around the world supporting each other and telling these stories, I mean, look at Reservation Dogs, super excited. And as indigenous people, we know that we need to support each other to tell our indigenous stories. I've seen casting situations where they're like, oh, it's a Native American character, but then they slip an indigenous person in from another country who's not indigenous to the Americas, but still keep that plot line. Doesn't seem like they have Native writers, and it's frustrating because that's those are people who've decided what our story needs to be and how it needs to be told. It was, I met with a casting director, and it was very frustrating because it was like, so I met with this casting director, and they were just like, oh, like the character, I play the character how I would, and in the end, that's what you're gonna get. You're gonna get that. You're gonna get somebody like, oh, I don't feel like that's you. I feel like you're more like this, and was telling me like how I relate to my own Native history and my own relationship to the world. And I was young when that happened, and so it really threw me off and kind of like made me think I didn't know myself, or I didn't know my relationship to my culture and my family and the United States, and so that really bothered me. And so I think I'm excited that Indigenous people are around to lift each other up, and I'm glad that we are able to broaden this conversation. And I encourage non-natives to understand that to not then use it to lessen the fact that Native Americans are the Native people to the Americas, and that we have and that we are not interchangeable with other Indigenous people. Just like I don't think any other Indigenous person is interchangeable with me. I wouldn't go and I wouldn't try to make myself an Aboriginal person in Australia in casting, or try to be like, oh yeah, I wouldn't do that swap out. And so I encourage non-natives to embrace that there's Indigenous people all over the world and all our different stories, and also embrace that we are all different and we have different stories to tell, and we aren't interchangeable. Just like natives here aren't interchangeable, there's no absolution that happens there. And also to continue to emboldening Indigenous voices everywhere, because I think Reservation Dogs is a great example of Indigenous voices supporting Indigenous voices to tell specific Indigenous stories. And I think that is fantastic and amazing. And so I wouldn't ever want it to feel like all of a sudden we're making Indigenous people go against Indigenous people. I wouldn't want that to feel like that's the narrative that's coming out of this, because it's not. Indigenous people are supporting Indigenous people. But I feel like the more that people in this country become aware of and accepting and figuring out how to take agency over the American story and what the future of the American story looks like, the less that will be a problem.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. American Indians and Alaskan Indians have brought up this before. It does come off as maybe angry or divisive, but it's just a focus. We would like to have some focus on our community and understanding that, again, the world of Indigenous populations isn't a monolith, right? Mm-hmm. So no, that's fantastic. Doan, what would you, being an Alaskan Native, it's like another layer of uniqueness, we'll say, in terms of how your community developed and formed and got their recognition. So what would you recommend to maintain our voice?
I don't know exactly how to answer to this question, because I think there's a lot behind it. But kind of a short and sweet answer maybe is that I think that any way that we can decolonize the screen, I'm here for. So if that means we're supporting Indigenous people abroad, we are standing with Indigenous people here to get those stories to the screen so that people have the access to Indigenous storytelling. I'm here for it. In terms of, I hate to make it seem as though it's like a us, them, in any kind of conversation. But yeah, I think that it's just that we do need to protect our stories. We need to protect our voices. And I think a part of what we can do is, just Indigenous people of America, we can call it America. The way we can do that is by supporting each other. And so I'm here to stand with each of you. I'm by your side. We got to get each other through this. Like, I think that's the only way to do it. And so I think it's just really supporting one another and being an ally in all forms that we can do that. And I think that's what's important. And just, like, let's fucking decolonize the screen. Let's do it.
I really hope they're live tweeting. Don't you have awesome hashtags? Sovereignize the space, decolonize the screen. So the live tweet must be blowing up right now with these hashtags. Okay, so anyway, so I appreciate that.
I think.
Was that? Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think just another expansion on that is, and as an actor, like, it's hard. There's not that many roles, so I understand why, other indigenous people or just indigenous people, period, would take on other cultures or traditions that aren't theirs just to, like, get the credits and get, seen and stuff like that. And it's one of those things where it's like your career versus your morals kind of thing. And that was when the youth asked me about, a particular show that has a non-native actress lead, but is portraying Native, like, how I feel about that. And I was like, okay, well, my feeling is I asked to never, ever be submitted to that show again. So it's like I took a stand personally, which, might not be great for my career, but I'm like, but I was like, I don't want to be a part of that show because they don't align with my morals. And on top of that, I've been offered roles where I play other ethnicities, and, it's like, and I ask, I try not to, I'd be like, okay, well, is it part of their culture? Like, is it like, okay, this is a Mexican person and they're doing, stuff that's legitimately straight Mexican. And I'm like, no, I can't play that. But if it's just like, she's a cop named, Lucia, then I'm like, okay, then that's fine, but it's like, if it's a matter of actual cultures, traditions, values, beliefs, and stuff like that, like, I feel like you have to be able to be like, as an actor, be like, no, I'm leaving that space open for the proper person, kind of,
I think I know what you're talking about, because sorry. I was just going to add histories to cultures and practices, and knowing if that history is super important to the character, then that should be important to the I think we're talking about, sorry, Ian.
Yeah.
You already said it.
No, finish your thought, please. It sounds much better coming from you.
Oh no, just that, like,
also Kara. Oh, so I was going to compliment Kara on just the job she's doing, dancing around what the show she's talking about.
Yeah,
I'm just being politically. Yes. I don't know.
Yes, no, you guys are very professional, very diplomatic. So I'm the one who is working on that part of his repertoire. So again, thank you for that, Kara. Sienna, thank you as well. Regarding portrayal of a community's voice, I want to discuss the representation of the TwoSpirit community. As we know, LoveCraft Country is a widely celebrated and a popular show that attempted to do what the entertainment industry has been doing since its inception, and that is to portray and ultimately misinterpret other communities. In this instance, the portrayal of a TwoSpirit individual. So what can the industry do? What can the industry learn from this, and what can they do to better address this specific community? And Dawn, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because when you have like another BIPOC creator, you want to believe that they're gonna do right by you, but we all make mistakes, we all do. And from what I know of that experience, the creator did, kind of issue an apology after being called out on it. But I think that it was unfortunate because it just felt very exploitive, and to take something that is sacred to so many people, and not even that, but just it's just even taking the sacredness out of it. Like, again, like a human being, like we're walking in, not just as like a Native person, feeling the kind of oppressiveness that we feel from that, but also as a queer person. it just felt very unfortunate, and just totally a really hugely missed opportunity to put to shine light on what could have been said about this character. It was misused. It was misdirected. I don't know if they bothered to talk to a TwoSpirit person. I'm gonna guess not. Right, but why not? Why wasn't there a conversation there in the very beginning? It should have been very apparent that that's what was needed. And scripts go through how many rewrites, right? On a television show, there's so many rewrites, and it feels sad that it just wasn't caught, that wasn't addressed, and it shouldn't have been an issue that needed to be addressed. It should have been gone and look, you hope, as someone that is again, like a BIPOC creator, you're you come knowing what other BIPOC people, like the oppressive systems which we're all under. And so it's just it's too bad, because now what we have living is what was caught on tape and what is streaming. That's the reality, right? The apology to me, afterwards, it's okay, well, at least they acknowledge that and they will learn, I think, from that experience. But the unfortunate thing is what is living is what we can all go on to our streaming devices and see that portrayal. It's ugly portrayal. It's too bad.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And Jason, I'd like to, if you, look, it's cis males, we have our opinions, but we also have, we have an understanding of how to address certain things. Maybe you can share, your opinion on, addressing specific communities and things like this.
Well, I mean, that is, I didn't watch LoveCraft Country. And one of the things because I was once I started finding out about this information, it was it sounds like it's something that I would like, but now that this portrayal has entered it, it definitely speaks against what the actuality or lived experience of a Two-Spirit person is, based again on my reading it and talking to people who watched it. And it seems like it was an easily preventable situation to be in, right? Like you said, the creator is BIPOC, so why, knowing that she probably experienced things interpreted wrongly about her own culture represented on TV or movies, how that doesn't get taken care of ahead of time. My wife's a TV writer, and for every different one of the subjects that she has to write for, there's several consultants that they talk to all the time who have specializations given life experience, whatever. It just, I don't know. It's like I said, it's unfortunate, but it seems preventable. And that's, I think, the part that that's the hurtful part, because it could have been, it seems like there was a way around it, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, you guys mentioned this hurtful thing. I think there's also, I think we're probably, we're fans of HBO, we're fans of J.J. Abrams, we're fans of Bad Robot. So yeah, so it's like a letdown. It's like being, seeing these icons, TV and film. It can, that adds another layer of the hurt, or the letdown, as I mentioned. And Jason, you brought up a good point. The writer may have experienced the same thing on another level, and that's something that I think that our community still faces. Is that other communities have dealt with this, and now I'm kind of seeing it in reverse now. It's happening to us from all kinds of non-natives, we'll say. So yeah, it's something that hopefully does change. Kara, you were giggling before. Did you have something you wanted to?
I think Well, my giggling means I have thoughts. But yeah, no, honestly, I think one of the beautiful things about social media is now that um like people are actually listening to it. So when people are like when these studios and people screw up, you know, we got our fans on Twitter and Instagram and everywhere being like, "Hey, you messed up, like don't do this again," to where it's like hopefully other studios and other people are listening to to people and listening to us when we say, hey, this isn't accurate, this isn't right, and we're getting our allies behind us saying, hey, like if this isn't how they're supposed to be portrayed, then don't portray them that way. So I'm hoping that, you know, us mobilizing and our allies mobilizing, that we can start putting more and more pressure on writers and studios and execs and whoever it needs to be put pressure on to accurately represent us and to like I mean, I feel like it's so simple to put out a call. Hey, does anyone know any two-spirited people? We would love to talk to them. And then you're like, yeah, you got writers, you got actors, you got producers, you got directors. I mean, like, there's no shortage of different type of people in our community. So it's like, just ask, and guess what? We will answer and we will talk your ear off. So it's like, to me, it is very heartbreaking, the fact that like how does this slip through the thing when through the cracks, when seriously, like, you just ask anyone, somebody will find something. I mean, Hollywood's not that big of a community.
That's a good point. Sienna?
And I think this speaks to what we spoke to before. On a level, I think it speaks to this idea that we as writers, artists, performers know ourselves and what we know, but also we have to know that we don't know a lot of things. And I think that's super important to know that you don't know things. And so when you ask other people, or you keep reading, or you keep learning, or you keep being inquisitive, I think it keeps you from reaching the stage where you're like, I know the thing's going to move forward now. And that this is a never ending process. And it's fine that this is a never ending process. Most processes never end. I'll never finish doing dishes because I will continue dirtying dishes. That's just how life works. And I'm sorry for people who want to achieve full awokeness and be done. It doesn't happen. But on a level, I think it's about having these pathways built already, so that when these conversations come up, a performer or a writer, having natives around in all these different parts of production would make that easier, but also having a pathway so that someone who isn't in a position of power can call this out and not feel like it's going to turn sour. I think it's important, and it's brave to do that. But I also understand people who are native thinking about their futures and their jobs and food on the table and families and all these different things. And so I think it's about creating those pathways so that we can easily have these conversations before it gets to the screen, before you have to get called out on Twitter, before you hurt tons of people, before you hurt your own show. That's just the reality of it. And so it's hard to do that. And it's not that hard to make it an okay conversation. I got called by it was a late night show, and they had a native joke, and they wanted someone to do the voice for it. And then I read it, and my first instinct was just to say, no, and then let them, beef it on TV. But then I was like, I shouldn't do that. Like, I should have this conversation I don't want to have. So I called the lady back and I told her, and she was a little too horrified. She was nice. She was like, oh my God, we don't have any native writers and da-da-da. And then she was like, well, like, if we take this note, like, it'll not be on the air. And I'm like, well, so that's what's going to have to happen right now. Cause I understand your guys' turnaround and all that kind of stuff. But like, it's about making it easier for people to have those conversations, because I'm sure on a level, some people were worried about being perceived as difficult by casting and were reached out to and just said, no, I've just said no on project before, because I'm like, I don't feel like saying all the different things that are wrong with this, because then I'll be perceived as difficult and annoying, as opposed to someone who is coming in and trying to help you. And so I think it's about making sure those pathways exist. I've said pathways like 9 times now. I will stop.
That's great. You made a really great analogy. The dirty dishes to the full wokeness. It's something you're constantly working on. I think that's a really great statement because there is no way to just have a full understanding of everyone's feelings, backgrounds, desires, etc. So that's a really great thing to say. So before we wrap up, look, I'm super old, and I've seen interest in film in native film and TV come and go. We, with The Last Mohicans, Dance with Wolves, TNT did wanted to do a whole series of several native TV movies. So I've seen the ebb, the tide, the ebb and the flow of the tide. Right now we're seeing a nice tide of, content. So I'd like to know, so how can we maintain this? Like, how can, instead of it being part of a fad, how can we maintain it so that it's here to stay, that it's permanent, that people understand that our content is just as valuable, just as important, and just as marketable as everyone else's. Kara?
Yay. No, honestly, I think I know that sounds so enthusiastic. But honestly, it's just us telling good stories, us being good actors, us being, because I'm, trends come and go, but leggings stay forever. But it's literally we're it's us being good storytellers and us just working hard. I honestly I'm sure trends are going to come and go, and hopefully there's been such a push on diversity, period. I think my biggest fear is that we're going to become a box to be checked kind of thing. We got our token native. Awesome. Who cares if they can act? Who cares if they can write? Who cares if they can produce or direct or anything? We just checked our box and move on. But I think us actually being no, we have our stories, we have talent, we're badass, once we get to start showing people that, I think people are going to definitely take us seriously, because our content is awesome. So we're awesome, and they're going to, the world's taking notice finally, and so let's just keep, I don't want to use that analogy. That analogy is bad. Let's just keep taking the bull by the horns.
Nice. Very good. Jason, you have some, you've been around for a little while as well. Maybe you could share some insight, some insight as well.
I wouldn't call 25 around for a while, but
I'm sorry. I apologize. I know we met when you were 10, I think, and your career just take off.
No, I mean, Kara's right. Trends are going to change. No one knows what's going to be popular, what's not. All we can do is the job we're given, and hopefully with this ebb in the tide, we'll make enough of an impression where it's not just about getting a seat at the table. It's realizing that there should always have been multiple seats at the table, and they're not just token seats. They're valuable box seats. I don't know. We just have to, the more valuable we show what, we got to take our seats and run with it, and people will see that. And I'm running out of analogies. I don't have any dirty dishes to use.
Is the clock? Is that wrong? Is it something? No, I'm kidding. I know. I get your point, though. No, you're absolutely right. Take the bull by horns. Take the seat. Take all those things. Do
dishes.
Yes, do your dishes. Dawn, do you have maybe a final comment you'd like to add as well?
Yeah, I think it's, kind of like what they were kind of speaking to, but it's just showing up. I think we have the stories ready to tell. So as long as, executives and people in power come to us, want to work with us, we have the stories. We're ready to tell them. And I think, it is a continuation. There are other filmmakers that came before us that really, really dealt with some shit. And so, respect to them. And there are many. I think that, there was this article that came out about Wes Studi, recently, and I'm like, man, he deserved that honorary Oscar, right? Just for dealing with the fucking bullshit, but he's a great actor. Anyway, so many people to mention, but to really see it as a continuation, and we're we're ready. We're here to fill that seat. And I think that it's about also creating more space for other voices to come through. So as much as we can get through, it's like pulling as many people along with us that we can. I think that's really important. And then just a ton of respect to, organizations like NAMA and, what you're doing with LA Skins and what the Sundance Indigenous program is doing, the Cherokee Film the organization. And yeah, thank you. And I mean, there's so many, and I think that it's a culmination of all of these people that are working their fucking ass off, and some have been doing this for decades. So thank you, Ian, and to everyone else that is out there, like, fighting for us, trying to create more opportunity, more visibility, and so much respect.
Thank you, Doan, and thank you guys for sharing your time and being on the panel. Yes, please, Sarah. We're yes, please wrap it up for us.
Oh no, I wanted to answer the question too.
Okay, yes, please. Yes, we're over, but please.
Very quickly, I just think what Dawn's talking about is over years we've been building a table, and we are building a table for ourselves. I mean, look at what Sierra and Ellis is doing. Look at what Jill and Harjo's doing. They just pulled like 1,000 people in at once and slam, and now they're in there, and we're in here. And I think it's all about making sure that we take care of our table. Okay, that's it. Yes.
Okay, no, thank you guys. Santa, thank you. I really appreciate all your time.
2 dinner analogies.
Yes, it is. It's time to eat. So no, I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for your time, and thank you, Walter Cates. You could see us at www.nama.media. That's where all of our programs. We have a TV Writers Lab, Feature Film Writers Lab, Writer Seminar, Animation Lab. We're going to be announcing an unscripted workshop coming this fall. We also have a 9-month showrunner program. So we do a lot for the community. We develop a lot of artists, and we just try to make sure that we are prepared, engaged, and developed and ready to go when the opportunity arises. So I do want to thank Walter Cates and the Hollywood Creative Forum for hosting us. And we'll go ahead and give it back to Dana.
Thank you. That was an amazing conversation. Listen, all of you out there who are watching, if you didn't walk away with a tweetable, something to post, and some sort of gem, then I really don't know what to tell you. I appreciate Ian and all of our panelists for holding us accountable, for shedding a light, and it was a really insightful conversation. So thank you very, very much.
We all have a story to tell. Beautiful, complex, fascinating stories. Told through a lens of varying shades and experiences. That's the power of art imitating life. It cannot be defined or confined to one space. So let your creativity soar. Fill the page, press record, and dare to captivate the masses with your authentic voice. We all have a story to tell. What's yours?